So you may have heard me be pretty vocal about the fact that I love the R6. I love it so much, but we've gotten so many questions and so many people are wondering, do you really need to switch to the R6 if you're in wedding photography? Do you need to sell your old DSLR? What about lenses? How do you make decisions about your camera body and what you do next? I'm gonna answer all these questions and more in this video. Hey there, I'm Katelyn. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is a place where we like to empower photographers to build profitable and purposeful businesses while also letting you in to the behind the scenes of our everyday life. So in the past, camera body upgrades have been pretty straightforward, right? So you would try to get to full frame. You know, if you're wanting to be a professional, you want to get rid of your crop sensor eventually and you go full frame, and then eventually the 5D series is the goal. But now the transition to mirrorless, it's just different and it requires more thought. It requires thinking about lenses and adapters and what do I really need? And so I'm going to break down a lot of different questions from a lot of different scenarios for photographers who are wondering, am I okay not to upgrade? Or if I do upgrade, what do I upgrade to based on my situation? So we've seen these questions arise over and over again in the KJ Education Facebook group, which is a Facebook group with over 10,000 photographers. You can be a part of it. You can grow in there. It's a great community. We make sure people are nice, and you can actually access it at the link below if you're a professional photographer or want to be a professional photographer and want to learn and grow in that community. So don't miss out on that if you're not a part of that already. We're going to take some of the most well-known scenarios that we're hearing about. I'm going to break it down in the rest of this video. But before we dive into that, I want to make sure you guys are thinking about 4 questions that come into play when you're considering a big purchase like a new camera body. So here are 4 prerequisite questions to think about before you actually dive into making a big purchase. So when you're buying a lens, you know, you're thinking about like, what are my needs on a wedding day? Or what are my needs during a shoot? But when you're upgrading to a camera body, it is such a big investment and it's such a big deal. I think there's some other things to consider because of the price point. Before you ever dive into what should I actually get, let's think about a few things. 1, do you know if this upgrade is a need or a want? We have a lot of people who are like, I feel kind of left out. Everyone's talking about their new R5 or R6. I feel like I'm left out. Well, I get it. Not everyone has to switch right now. If you have a functioning full frame camera that's doing a great job, it's not crapping out on you, the shutter count is, medium to low, it's not been maxed out, like maybe you don't need a new camera body, you just want a new camera body. And it sounds so simple, but I think a lot of people, if you really step back and think about it, a lot of people can save themselves the stress of feeling like they gotta buy something new if they just really think about, do I actually really need this? All right, because there will come a time in the future where you have to upgrade. There will be a time when your camera starts to putter out on you and you need to change something. But is that now? Do you really need it or do you just want it? So that's the first thing to consider. So another thing to consider is, do you have other purchases in your business that you are more dire need of? You need them in order to improve your work and your life and your business overall. Hard drives, do you need a macro lens? Do you need more flash equipment? Are there things that would help your work more than just upgrading to a new camera body that has a better autofocus and is the new shiny thing? Like, is there something else you should be spending your money on? Third question is, would this decision, buying a new camera body and upgrading to something, is it gonna put you in financial distress? Kind of self-explanatory. Can you afford it? If not, then let's back away from it until you can, because financial distress is stressful. Last but not least, do you have legitimate urgency to make this purchase? Maybe you booked your first wedding and you have one camera, you need a backup camera, you can't shoot a wedding without it. I'd say that's pretty urgent. Maybe you have a camera that you've been using, but it's showing signs that it's like failing you. That's urgent. There are a lot of different scenarios that can cause urgency, so think about it. Are you in that situation where you gotta make a change because something's happening to your old camera, or you have something new that you've booked and you need new equipment in order to be able to do that well? All right, so let's talk about the 4 scenarios that we're hearing most often with the most questions. So question number 1, this person has a Mark III, they've been saving up for a Mark IV. Should they get an R6? They're worried about their lenses. What do you do with lenses if you go up to the R6 and switch over to mirrorless? I'll say this a million times. I don't know if anyone is in this situation, I don't know when it would make sense to get a Mark IV, because the future of Canon cameras moving forward is going to be mirrorless. And so if that's the direction you're headed, then this is a great time to make the shift. You've been saving, you have the money there, the money and the expense of those two options is comparable. So I would make the switch to mirrorless. So technically you could get a used Mark IV. You run some risk there, but you could do that and save maybe $1,000. But you're kind of delaying the inevitable. Like you're going eventually in your career. If this is for the long haul, you're gonna switch to mirrorless down the road sometime. So now you're at a fork in the road and you gotta decide, am I gonna go down that road now or am I gonna go down that road later? And because the cost discrepancy between the two is not huge, I would say go mirrorless now, because you can use an adapter and the lenses you already have are gonna work great. All right, so second question, I have a crop sensor camera. I want to go pro. Do I save and go mirrorless when I can afford it, or do I buy like a Mark III or a Mark IV right now? Here are some things to think about. So first of all, if you have a crop sensor, why are you wanting to upgrade from the crop sensor? Like, is there a sense of urgency because you booked a wedding and you feel like, gosh, I can't shoot a wedding with a crop sensor? Because you could, especially if you have a more modern crop sensor camera that has really great capabilities. The thing about switching from crop sensor to full frame, if you don't have the right education, that's not gonna solve all your problems. And your work is not gonna improve drastically because you went from crop sensor to full frame. But I understand maybe you have a crop sensor camera and you don't have a backup and you booked a wedding and now you got to do something. You got to have another camera, and it makes sense that your next camera, wanting to go pro, your next camera would be full frame. So I understand that. I would think about where the urgency is coming from. Are you thinking that a full frame camera is going to solve all your problems technically? Probably won't. You probably need to learn more about lighting and settings and how you pick your locations. And we've got courses for that. I would say if the money is there, I would always recommend that you go with the R6 and you switch to mirrorless. If the money is not there, then how long can you be held off? Like, how long could you rent for a wedding or two and get through a season and save up? How long can you go in the scenario that you're in and still create great images, but not feel the need to splurge and get the R6 or the R5? Overall, I think you should think to yourself, am I asking myself the right question? Because maybe instead of what do I do this or this, maybe you should think of, well, if I'm trying to go from a crop sensor camera to go full frame because I want to look more pro, and that's why I'm making the shift, do you have off-camera flash? Do you have a decent computer that can help you edit well and the screen provides clarity of color and it's fast? Do you have anything beyond a kit lens? If you only have a kit lens, that's more of a priority than changing to full frame. There are a lot of things to consider, and it would be sad for you to spend all of your hard-earned money that you've saved to upgrade to an R6 and go mirrorless when no one's going to notice that shift in professionalism like they would if you start using dimensional light with off-camera flash. There's a lot of other ways that you can look more professional than just going from crop sensor to full frame. Question number 3, I just bought a Mark IV less than a year ago, so what do I do now? If you are not in dire need of having like a backup camera, I would just hold tight. If you have a brand new Mark IV, you just made that big investment, then just wait it out. And maybe, if at all possible, don't make significant EF lens investments, because you know in the future, eventually, you're going to shift to mirrorless. So just hold tight where you are and wait for that to come. And honestly, by the time you're ready to upgrade and you need to have a new camera body, there could be a new option for mirrorless that's more advanced, more updated, has better features. But if you know that that's coming down the road, but you just made a good investment in the Mark IV and that's not going anywhere, just hold tight where you are, knowing that you're moving that direction and you can make smart, wise lens purchases and maybe not throw a lot of money into EF lenses, knowing you're eventually going down the trail of R series lenses. Canon is focusing their attention on R lenses. That is the future. So why would we be investing in something that down the road will probably become somewhat obsolete? So that's why it makes sense and is more beneficial to make the switch to mirrorless as soon as you can, because you can start building your R series collection of lenses. However, this goes back to the 4 questions before. Can you afford it? Is it urgent? Is it going to put you in financial distress? You got a lot of things to consider when you're making these decisions, but I do think it's safe to say, like, I would never even think about buying an EF lens now because I have a mirrorless camera. If I was someone who's going to buy mirrorless in the future, but I'm not quite there yet, I still would think, why am I buying an EF lens if it's all going to shift in the future? So those are things to consider. Overall, I hope this was helpful. We get these questions literally every day in our inbox. constantly being asked in our Facebook group. Our goal was to give you some things to think about and to give you some advice that we've been giving people outside of our social media platforms. When we get emails about this, I'm constantly giving people some things to think about. And I thought, why not put this in a video so we can direct people to this in the future? If it's helpful, I'd love to hear about it. If you have questions, I'd love to hear those. If you love these videos and you want more free education, more advice, and more experience from someone who's been doing it 12 years, subscribe. We'd love to have you. Thank you for tuning in. Bye.
Bye.